what success looks like. And we didn't go initially to one of the instruments. We went back to display thinking and to design thinking, and we did another exercise. And we said, okay, now that we know that, and we may have done this with the leaders to get their input in here, so it's their idea. What does success look like? We 3 Post-its, what does success look like for purpose? 3 Post-its, what does success look like for people? Then we filter sort them into themes, and we came up with our own kind of custom scorecard of what we're gonna try to measure. So in the end, we were talking about profit and revenue, of course, answer the ROI question. We were talking about sales, right? So we're going to increase the baseline. We were talking about innovation, so new ideas that help contribute to that. And then we were talking about happy clients or customers, product or service. So that got us to our key success criteria on purpose, right? So we went there to get to the ROI piece, and then Steve, you were going to talk about how do you bridge that into people.
Yeah, so we wanted to also have metrics on the people in the workplace and really put them side by side. So those ones that we kind of came up with were health and well-being. Cynthia came up with a great one is number of sick days reduced, but number of PTO hours increased, which I had never thought about that myself. But there's so many people that max out on PTO after how many years, and they just need rejuvenation. They need some help, relaxing. A&R, I always forget what A&R is.
Attract and retain.
Oh, attract and retain talent, right? So put that as a metric. The effectiveness of people, I threw out, how do we track how effective people are? Steve said that Germans that he worked with do the same amount of work in 36 hours in 5 days that we do in 55 hours in 5 days. So how can we get more efficient so we're not at the office longer? And then what great life choices are we making? Are we going to our kids' soccer games? Are we taking that cooking class at 4 p.m. to leave early to spend time with your family? Those sorts of things. But we didn't steal it from you guys, I swear. But both of these we obviously want to see go up and to the right, but we want to overlay them or have them side by side to see if they are directly correlated, and hopefully they are, to again answer the return on investment question. Because if your people's health and well-being is going up, one would think that the company's purpose is also going up and to the right as well.
So once we got clear on what success looked like, or begin with the end in mind, then they typecast the architect to talk about diverse place and people. How are we going to impact the workplace? So we started just brainstorming about this. We wanted accessible leadership, so we needed to break down the walls. We wanted more socialization and engagement. We felt that would contribute to that. Then we used the workbook to answer the question, what are the major elements you're going to be adding or upgrading? Well, we realized we got to renovate the cafeteria anyway. So why don't we start there? An early win, but a big enough win where you can start to create that engagement, socialization, and work process in a different way. So how do you make the working cafeteria an all-day place for engagement, not just a lunchtime or a breakfast thing? So we said we got to have healthy food, we got to have natural light, we got to have nature, message and purpose to help people start to get it in terms of environmental graphics in the space. Places to reflect and meditate, right? And it doesn't necessarily have to be next to your desk. It could be a place that I go. You may be able to take classes to meet the needs of that diverse workforce. So we said, okay, that's something we can really start to put some scope around, so Bullwinkle can put a number on it, right? And work towards getting this change moving and using the workplace as a methodology to initiate some of the change. And you'll see in a minute that it's not just place, but it's going to be program, and how do we institute a certain storyline to that program that helps people see very clearly what we're trying to do with the place. So we started there. So here's Bullwinkle. He's got a traditional mindset, so he needs that number, that scope on what we're going to do next so that we can put it in the budget. Take our work in flight and put it into something that really fits P2. So we're also going to focus on people's habits, their lack of knowledge and know-how, create a clear path forward. We started looking at the workbook there. And we said the change formula was a clear and compelling vision, realizing that squirrels, especially flying squirrels, have very good eyesight and great vision. Always tying it back to the characteristics of the leader, which is I think what you're getting at right now. So then we went to the last piece that we called these titles up here, change and implementation. New habits and behaviors, what does that look like? And I think that the team immediately keyed on the idea that we've got to get buy-in from the leadership, that leadership has to demonstrate and embrace of this new way of approaching wellness and well-being in the workplace.
And
But-
buy-in from the staff.
Right, and balanced with, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry, just wanted to add
Perspective
that.
of the people, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And how do you organize that? Because once you get the leaders on board, then how do you organize yourselves around that? So then we looked at change and brought in a couple more tools, really just based on that brainstorming. You know, we slept on it, went to the printer at the business center. And we said, so what about Kubler-Ross? Let's look at that a little more deeply. We did that this morning. That's the personal process that we all go through for grief. So get the leaders personally invested, understanding this is the process of change for you personally. Then scale it up, Gartner's tools, so their change curve. Notice the change curve for Gartner closely matches the individual process of grief, right, or change. So scale from the personal, the leaders are on board, organize the workforce around this process of change, and then create a program. So this is the HDP's change continuum loop, which is 3 or 4 different change methodologies that enables you to put a program together that can take you through change, which often feels like a roller coaster. In this diagram, it's a single loop roller coaster. And then recognizing that that's what change feels like. And some people it's exciting, and some people it's scary, and if you go through it together, you can all have fun, right? And start to explain it in ways you can organize the workforce around that. So that was the change piece. So then, what's the new reality and the time frame? We think at some point, we're gonna take that initial workplace change at the cafeteria and start to scale it out over the organization. We think we're gonna take that initial change program and start to implement that across more programs with HR. And we do think you need to rebrand the corporation because this is a major change and it's a life or death thing to try to attract the right people to make you successful. But we think you're rebranding in about a 2-year time frame, which gets you to a 3 to 5 year transformational schedule. And then where is your leader in 5 years? Still flying, but recognizing that this is not a destination. ROI is not a destination, but that too is a journey, not a destination. And we feel like the CEO is going to be moving more into karma, realizing as the company moves forward, more inspirational. You've solved all the number questions. You've got people's buy-in, and taking flight into new markets.
Linda.
Yeah, I really like that you took the time to explore the change piece on this and then tying it back to the beginning of your story, because that's the tough, this engagement, and when you talked about engagement, that's really the most emotional piece of all of this. So I'm glad that you dug into that.
Yeah, I liked bringing the different change models in. That'll help me to think through. And then there's Otto Schramer's U theory as well that follows a similar curve. It talks about it, kind of going into deep despair and
We
stuff
just
like that.
finished our workshop series on change, and we probably looked at 30 through
Wow.
different change methodologies, all the way back to hepatitis, in the DC. The amount of effort that's been put at looking at change, and what's interesting is there's common themes that run through all of it, and it's only up until recently in organizational theory, which is a relatively new science, right? 45 to 50 years old, some argument on that. Lots of different methodologies, so this is just a few. So finding what works for you, I think is what's important.
That's cool. Very cool.
And it creates kind of this movement philosophy throughout when you started creating a brand around what you were attempting to do.
I was just going to say the same thing. I'm a marketer, but I tell my teams, we talk about the fact that we we have to do internal marketing and sales to the rest of the members of our
Hmm.
organization. And sort of crafting a marketing campaign to do that internally is really important, more important than a lot of people think.
Yeah.
Because that's how you get, you bring people along with you. They understand what you're doing, why you're doing it, and if you can start, crafting not just the story around it, but some labels that people can easily remember. I also like the organization of how you put this together because it's pretty simple.
We
that
eliminated a
helps.
lot of the pages in the workbook,
That-
but we worked through all the pages to say what's going to be
Yeah.
the best tool,
What I really like is you didn't follow the workbook. You reinterpreted, reused it, changed it, cut it up, which is great.
We like the idea of a workbook, though. I
Yeah,
think that's
it's a straw man.
a strong man.
I just wanted to piggyback on what you said and tie it back to that morning meeting or having something in the morning. That's a great opportunity to do your internal marketing. And something that Patrick Lencioni says, you need to be the chief reminding officer, the CRO. So you have a message, you have make it clear, then you communicate it, then you re-communicate it, then you over-communicate it. So
But I think it highlights something we said too, which was full engagement, authenticity, get your people on board before you go out to the marketplace,
Yeah.
because then it's going to be sustainable.
Yeah.
I like the 3 to 5 years, putting some reality into how long does this actually take to produce some results. You often see new leader, new CEO comes in the company and says, we're going to change corporate culture and we're going to have it done in 3 months. And it's like, good luck with that.
Yeah, been there.
I got the memo already written, we're going to get it out, we're done. So I think it takes longer than that, and I think the leaders need to kind of get that into their head that this is, like you said, it's a journey, not a destination, and you're going to be taking a journey, and a journey goes for a while.
Well, and we didn't talk about this specifically, but this idea that came out of this conversation with you all about a day in the life or how do you start your day, wouldn't it be cool to have our visioning session with the leaders and talk about this idea of taking the cafeteria, which is a dump, and turning it into this great place, but you start and middle and end your day there. I mean, you could really craft a narrative around that.
Yeah,
Really
it's a
influence.
bridge
And then you're
narrative.
bringing other people in to start testing this new company with your clients and your customers. I think it could be an interesting showcase.
Let's do 3 more and then we'll take a break.
I wanted to mention just a couple of things on that. Part of what we come to work for is a culture and to be part of a culture. And you can achieve that through the built environment and come in for energy and collaboration and working with your other teammates and bouncing ideas off of each other and to have a sense of purpose as part of a community. And we talked about that a lot with the connecting the dots. But the other part about it is, and we wouldn't have really gotten to this if we didn't do this exercise that Patrick had suggested, but for the purpose is really kind of why the company exists. And we pay attention to these things like profit and sales and innovation and leadership in a market. But these are really why people go to work. And yes, it is to earn a living so that you can pay your bills, feed your family, have vacation time, but it's also so that you can grow as a professional. And there are other parts of wellness that aren't just centered around health, but it's Chelsea and I talked about this. It's financial
Right.
wellness. It's opportunities to grow within your profession and learn and become an expert, which will eventually drive into the purpose of the company. But it's kind of why the company exists and why people actually show up to work.
Yeah.
Those are things that we have to track together.
I really like what you were saying, especially about the vote and the people left, because I have such a love-hate relationship with that vote, because a lot of leaders I talk to about it just take it as, well, that's it, and it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy. That's what it is, and yep, I see that. And they kind of just gloss over it, but the thing to notice is that it's an average, and when you frame it to them that way, like, okay, well, that's the average. You want to be an average company? If you show them that with like an earnings or their product, who would say, well, that's exactly right, that's where we're always going to be. So when you can frame it to them of this is average, wouldn't you like your company to be more this way? Would you want to instead
instead of just taking it as, well, that's what it is, we're dealing with it.
Right.
Using that
It's
as a way
great.
to say, let's be above
Great
average, especially
observation.
for all these leadership personas, want to be above average in some way, that's why you're a leader.
Well, and you may not think at this stage that Jack Welch has anything to do with Rocky and Bull, but we beg to differ, and it's that up and to the right, right? And for us, that's what really, Chris and Steve were harping on, is up and to the right. But here, it's people and purpose. They got to go up and to the right,
Okay.
both at the same time. And when we start seeing the correlation, that's when it gets really juicy, really effective.
Yeah, none of these
If we could get there with this success criteria, then we'd have something. So we're not sure if one of the instruments would be best, or if it's just mapping back to what we said was important.
So two more. It's Irene and then Chris
I
and
really
then
like
Michael.
How you came around to selecting your leader, and the fact that you went to the traits and figured out, what are qualities of a leader, and then you personalized it, and it was Bob, and all of a sudden it's like, it's Bob, but from Bob, it became this cartoon. The thing about it is sometimes when we go to these meetings, we try to talk to somebody, we feel so distant from the people that we're talking to, but by going through that exercise, you brought it to, it could be any of us, it's very personal, so how do we appeal with them if you understand them and know them on a different level, even if he's a flying squirrel, but it started with a personal level, so.
So
I think that
next time you see Bob Fox, you're going to think of him as the
Call him-
flying squirrel.
Call him Bob Squirrel.
Yeah. Yeah. Chris?
So, a very tactical thing I heard that you went by quickly was the notion you said of hiring Whitney and Phil.
Yeah.
I think oftentimes when we know enough to be dangerous and we're going into a critical discussion, you got to have the right people with the right subject matter experts. And oftentimes as teams in the construction industry or the design industry, it's like you have a team available and that's who you send.
Right.
But they're not necessarily the right people. And when you're having these kinds of high-stake discussions, Whitney and Phil are the right people to have that kind of dialogue until you yourselves have that expertise. And I thought that was a really tactical point that you said, oh, we're going to utilize the well standards. Like, no, we're going to bring in the experts to have that discussion.
Well, we also talked about, bringing in Chris and Greg and DPR right about here,
Okay.
Because they get it. Cafeteria, I was hoping VHDP would get a little work out of there. Rex is on the front end with the workbook. You're all coming in and helping Rocky, fly to the next destination.
Excellent. So Michael, you want to close this up or?
Well, I did. I wanted to, me and Michelle are on the same page with this internal marketing branding. And I work with a lot of clients through change initiatives, and this is what I try to remind them about that. That kind of branding, that message will happen whether you control it or not. It's not an add-on. It's a risk aversion, because if you do not brand it yourself, what's going to happen is there's going to be 1,000 brands of it, each existing in somebody else's head, and each slightly different. It's a matter of controlling the message and controlling the whole of how we look at it together.